Appalachia. Everybody in the world got a reaction to that word. Makes folks think everything from beautiful mountaintop views, dangerous hillbillies running through the woods with a rifle in one hand, a jug of shine in the other, to trailer parks, drugs, and blame near everything in between. The Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountains in the world. They once towered 30,000 feet into the air. They stretch along the eastern U.S. from Canada through 14 states all the way to Louisiana. Folks that live in these mountains have seen and endured enough things to have happened to them to make a preacher cuss. Hello, I'm Larry Bentley. I was born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains of Southwest Virginia, and I was raised there by folks who lived for generations right there in the heart of them old mountains. Come with me and we'll take a look at some of the odd, awful, and legendary things that happen within my beloved mountains, and we'll be traveling around a bit, looking through the eyes of an old Appalachian at some of the crazy that done spread itself around outside the area as well. Welcome to Season 6 of Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend. Howdy, my good friends. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you for stopping by. Glad you could join me today. But I'll warn you right up front that, you might want to pull your collar up and check the locks on the door. We're heading to the high, lonesome timber country of Greene County, Virginia. Specifically to, the top of Dean Mountain. Now, every now and again, when we eat one of these horror-wrapped terror sandwiches with extra dog squeezed, we might just, find a little bit of a silver lining somewhere along the way. Well, I'm here to tell you, you can just rake that idea off in the trash, because it's the silver we're talking about here, might be plated into the cold steel of a .38 revolver. Now, this is a story about a man that had more dollars than he had sense, and a temper like a dry brush fire, and a flighty mind that finally packed up and took permanent vacation from reality. It's a tragedy that left 6 youngins orphaned, and it all started with a man that couldn't tell the difference between a nightmare and truth. Special thanks to Aaron plus Michael Miller for bringing this one up out of the woodwork. So buckle up and, let me tell you about this one. Back in 1922, if you were looking in the dictionary to find what success in the Blue Ridge Mountains was, you'd find a picture of L. Groover Meadows. Now, Groover wasn't your average mountain feller stretching out a living in a rocky hillside. He was what we call mountain rich. He owned 500 acres of prime mountain land, ran sawmills and stave plants. Now, we all know what staves are. Staves are them wood strips that they use to make barrels and stuff like that, buckets and things. Now, Groover, generally had a shrewd business sense that made him a big fish in a small foggy pond. Now, we all know that money don't actually make the world go round, but it does grease up the axis right smart, and it dang sure didn't fix something that was rattling around in a man's attic. Now, the folks around Dean Mountain and Fern Hill knew Groover. They'd seen him and his wife Serena at church there in Fern Hill on Sundays, looking like a picture of mountain prosperity. But the neighbors knew that Groover was what folks called flighty. Now, that's a polite mountain way of saying his elevator didn't quite go to the top, or maybe if it did, the doors are always stuck shut. Now, he was a man of extremes. One minute he was religious as a nun, the next he was so bedbug nuts that he made folks step back a few steps and not make eye contact as they eased on out the door. He was the kind of feller that would buy a fancy house on top of a mountain, but then realize that he was up there all by himself with nothing but his own thoughts for company. And the same area, in fact, the same family, lived a feller named Stanton Dean. Now, Stanton was 22 years old and the first cousin of Groover. And, he's a hard-working young feller who just married his sweetheart, Carrie, 2 months prior. Now, Stanton worked as a hired hand. He was a teamster for Groover, living right there in the Meadows house with him. Now, Stanton was described as a fine young man, well-liked by everybody, but Groover. Groover had a, green-eyed monster living in his mush of a brain that was bigger than the mountain they stood on. One day they That no-good green-eyed monster, well, he convinced Groover that his wife Serena, who was the mother of his 6 children, and Stanton were, well, getting plumb jiggy with it right there in his house under his nose, and maybe even in his own bedroom. Now, there was zero evidence for any of it. Sarah was a hard-working woman, held in the highest esteem by the whole country up there. But when a man's mind is flighty, well, he don't need evidence. He just needs a shadow on the wall. So Stanton, well, he actually knew Groover was acting weird a few weeks before this tragedy I'm fixing to tell you about. Stanton told folks at Fern Hill Post Office that he'd wake up in the middle of the night and find Groover standing over his bed just staring at him in the dark. Now, if I wake up and find a half-crazy man with a flighty mind standing over me, well, I'm not sticking around for breakfast. I'm out the window before you can blink. But Stanton was family, and he needed to work, so he stayed. That was his first and final mistake, of course. Groover didn't just snap. Well, he'd been marinating in his own madness for a spell. He'd even gone to see Justice of the Peace L.H. Bruce in Elkton. Now, Justice of the Peace back then was the one that handled the warrants and presided over some of the cases. Stuff like drunk in public or assault, maybe. Just a fella you wanted to tell all your stuff to, I guess. Groover stepped up, laid his revolver right on the counter. Well, is a real classy way, to start a conversation, I reckon. But he told the justice, if things don't change, something bad's fixing to happen. He even asked the justice about life insurance. He wanted to know how long a policy had to be in effect before it was incontestable. He specifically asked if it would pay out if the insured committed suicide. See, old Groover was a businessman to the end, and he was planning to murder his family and then off himself, but he wanted to make sure the check cleared first, I reckon. Now, he was trying to fit a way to pay for his own funeral, I guess, while he was still planning the guest list. Come late Monday night, about 11 o'clock, the excrement hit the rotary oscillator, you might say. The Meadows family sat more than a mile from the nearest neighbor up on the Greene County line on Dean Mountain. Now, according to Groover's own confession, well, he retired for the night when his, moment of insanity, as he put it, took the wheel, and it apparently drove him into a ditch. Now, he claimed Serena admitted that she'd been untrue, which every neighbor and police officer later said was a flat-out lie, born in his own skull full of mush. Groover grabbed his .38 up, and he didn't hesitate. He tore down the stairs to the first door where Stanton Dean was sleeping like a baby. The moon was shining through his window, just enough to see Stanton's head on the pillow under the covers. Now, Groover, I reckon, walked up to the bed like John Wayne in McClintock, found Stanton's ear, and put 2 pieces of hot 3/8-inch lead into it, probably because just one wasn't enough to suit him. Stanton, he never knew what hit him. He went from a dream of his new bride to the great beyond without so much as a flinch. Then came the stomp-ass back up the stairs. Serena met him at the head of the stairway. Maybe she'd heard the shots. Maybe she was, coming to try to stop the whole mess and even maybe save her own life. The position of her body later showed that she was on her knees, probably pleading with the man to stop. And she'd, that she'd given 6 children to. But Groover, because a whackadoodle gonna do what a whackadoodle gonna do, didn't hear a word of it. He emptied the last 4 bullets into her, and she sank to the floor right there at the head of the stairs. Now, here's the part that really curdles your milk. Groover had 6 children in the house, the eldest being Cecil, who was 11. Now, the youngest was 8-month-old baby. Groover didn't kill the kids, but what he did was a whole peck of folks, I guess, think would be worse. He locked the 5 youngest in a room and told them to stay up there. He told them, and I'm not making this up, that if the house caught fire, they should jump out the window. Then he took Cecil with him, the 11-year-old boy, and dragged him out into the night. Now, the dog squeeze left 5 kids, alone in the house with 2 fresh corpses, more than a mile from help, in the pitch-black mountain dark. Now, bless her little hearts, them kids stayed right there until daybreak. Can you imagine the silence of that house? Well, unless maybe their mother might have been left still alive a little bit and had to listen to it while, well, what happened happened. The only thing louder than the wind outside could have been the quiet from the stairs after it's all over with. Groover walked 5 miles through ankle-deep mountain mud to the home of a man named Quentin Smith. Now, he asked Mr. Smith to drive him to Harrisonburg because he had some trouble with his wife. I guess that's like saying that the Titanic had a pinhole. Groover went straight to his lawyer, who told him to surrender his ass immediately, if not sooner. Now, he showed up at the jail around 4:30 in the morning. When the sheriff and the Commonwealth's attorney questioned him, Groover was as calm as if he was at an Easter Sunday sunrise service. I lost my nerve or I'd never be here, he told them, because I fully intended to kill myself. Now, he expressed regret, of course, but not for the lives he took. Oh, no, folks. His own regret was the timing. He told them, I didn't wait for the right time to do this. This killing, I acted way too soon. While Groover was sitting in a dry jail cell, feeling sorry for his nerves, now the authorities had to hike 5 miles back through the mud to reach a house. Little Cecil went with them. Poor young'un was probably wore to a frazzle by the time he got there, I'd imagine. When they stepped up on the place, several hundred people had already gathered around. Mountain news, I guess, travels faster than a telegram when blood's involved. Now, the crowd feelings was, about as against Groover as feelings could get. If he'd surrendered at Stewartsville instead of Harrisonburg, the sheriff said Groover's life wouldn't have been worth spit. Mountain folk were ready to provide their own version of something that was right incontestable, if you ask me. Now, after handing himself over in Harrisonburg, Groover was dragged back to Greene County and formally indicted for the murders of his wife, Serena, and his cousin, Stanton Dean. Now, when the case finally come to trial in the summer of 1925, the jury didn't buy Slapnut's momentary insanity plea near as much as he had hoped they would. He was convicted of first-degree murder for killing Serena and sentenced to spend the rest of his natural life in the Virginia penitentiary. Now, here's where the story takes another hard turn down a muddy mountain road. Now, them 6 children were left with no mother and a father that headed off to prison for the rest of his natural life. According to the court records, there weren't many relatives willing or maybe able to take on the burden of raising all 6 young'uns together. Eventually, an uncle carried the children to the Church of the Brethren Industrial School in Greene County, where they were took in and cared for. And old Groover, even sitting there with the life sentence hanging around his neck like a millstone, was still thinking like a businessman. Now, before heading off to prison, he transferred pretty much all the property he had left in a trust, and so the proceeds could be used to raise and educate his children. He led to, I guess that led to another court fight because Stanton Dean's family sued, arguing that the property ought to help pay damages for Stanton's killing instead. The case eventually went all the way to the Virginia Supreme Court in a lawsuit called Bruce versus Dean. In short, the property went on to be distributed just like Groover wanted, so I guess he won that one in the end. As for Groover, records show he remained under what they called a committee, basically somebody appointed to manage his affairs because folks considered him mentally unstable. After that, the trail gets mighty faint. There don't seem to be much public record about how or when he died, at least not easily available online that I could find. But what is crystal clear is this: the man who once sat upon Dean Mountain with 500 acres and sawmills, money, and influence, wound up spending the rest of his own life, mainly as a fella that destroyed his own family because he let jealousy and madness chew clean through his brain pipe like a groundhog on a pumpkin patch. That was the first tragedy to mar the peace of Fern Hill in decades. It was a section of the Blue Ridge where people looked out for one another. Well, until the well-to-do lumberman decided he was the judge, jury, and executioner of the very folks that cared for him or about him. And from what I understand, there weren't many of them around to start with. In the end, Stanton Dean's body was found just like it was still sleeping. Serena was found at the head of the stairs, and L. Groover Meadows, well, he sat in a cell, probably still wondering if his insurance policy paid out. Just goes to show, good friends, you can own 500 acres and all the sawmills in Virginia, but if you don't have a lick of peace in your own heart, you're the poorest man on the mountain. So keep your lantern lit, watch out for dog squeeze, and don't go wandering around the old mountain roads after dark. You never know what's liable to be waiting around the next bend. Hope you got something out of our story today. If you did, please rate and review the podcast, or if you're watching or on Rumble, YouTube, or Spotify, throw us a like, and don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you watch or listen. Come on over to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend podcast group on Facebook, where we talk Appalachian or about anything else you want to talk about. I'll be back real soon with another Appalachian murder, mystery, or legend. I will see you then.